Well, I just want to emphasize, I know this is kind of going off script, but that's who we are.
That's who we are. That's
I
what
think
people love about us.
that is true. I think one thing that's really important for teens specifically and young adults is the idea of those three C's, Dr. E, that you talk a lot about. So, yes, I want to talk about those three C's that lead to communication because I feel like, especially with our teens, that's so important. So, there's the comfort piece, which we always talk about, and that goes for all ages, but specifically for our teens and young adults, they need that comfort for them to fuel that communication. They also need the confidence, like you're talking about. So if a teen doesn't feel confident, if they're so reliant on their parent, there's no way that they're going to start fueling that communication, right? And then the last one is connection. And I think we're going to talk about this more as we continue to talk. But I think that a lot of our teens don't have those connections. They're not in that driver's seat in honestly all of their social interactions and engagements. And so many times, when you're younger, it's easy to just say, okay, I'm going to set up a play date for you and your three buddies. But as we get older, many of our teens and young adults don't have connections anymore. And it's always like, well, where do I go? How do I build that? So those three C's, I feel like, are so important to progressing to communication in so many more ways.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think that's going to play a role. And as we talk about various strategies, interventions, and tools that these teens and young adults can utilize, very practical in their everyday life to help build that independence that will fuel all that we just talked about. So let's talk about goal setting. I mean, parents tend to have goals for their teens or young adults, and they give them goals often, right? This is what you want to do. This is what, I was working with a teen recently where the parent is very much like, I need her to get into this school. It's a really important thing to get into this honors school. Meanwhile, this teen is not connected. She's not comfortable. She doesn't communicate with anyone. She's completely aloof, completely anxious. But the goal is to get into this other school that's a high-powered academic institution because the mom, that's really important to her and she thinks would be important. I'm like, hey, I get that, but let's kind of build up where your child is now to be able to have that fuel to succeed in that environment. If we were to emphasize that environment now, that poor kid would be so shut down and anxious and become depressed. And that's why the goals that a parent has sometimes have to be adjusted to be able to build these other aspects up with their child so that the child has the readiness for so many of the big goals that maybe a parent has. But what are the teens' goals? What are the young adults' goals? What are their goals? So setting personal goals is such an important part of our treatment. When we're working through the selective mutism eval, when working for individual care, one of the first things we ask are, what are your goals? Now, many don't know. And they're like, I don't know. I don't care. I don't have goals. But they do deep down. And sometimes you have to help them. But tell me some ways that you work with your clients on setting personal goals.
Yeah, so I feel like actually before I even talk about goals, usually the first thing I always do with a teen is I always assess their level of motivation. So I usually will always ask them from like 0 to 10, 10 being the most motivated. I do want to work through this. I recognize it's feeling really, really, really hard and difficult, but I do want to navigate. I need someone to help me. 0 being like, get out of this room, right? I usually try to get a baseline because I find that if someone says they feel like an 8 out of 10 motivated, which we don't have the statistics, but I always joke that I would love to get it because I would say like 99% of the time, people always say a 7 or an 8. That's a very common level of motivation. And I feel like before goal setting, it's so important to assess motivation because usually when someone then goes into goal setting, and let's say they are a motivated teen, that usually will help me navigate. And let's say someone's like, I don't have any goals. I'll be like, okay, well, I know we really want to work towards this. I know you had just shared with me, you feel like an 8 out of 10 motivated. I know this is something that you really want to work through. Why don't I provide you with a list of some common goals that other teens and young adults have? And let's see if you want to circle a few that you also align with. So many times, again, that's kind of the social identity piece where they're now hearing about what other people similar to them might be experiencing. And that's that piece that's really important because that's the community piece, the piece that people feel like they're very alone. They don't feel like anyone really relates to them. So the minute that you start providing them with certain goals that could help them, you're not telling them what their goal is, but you're saying, hey, these are some common ones. Why don't you circle a few? now you're passing them that autonomy, and you're passing them that opportunity for them to be like, oh yeah, I do want to actually get more comfortable with my teachers. Oh, I do want to be able to progress across the social communication bridge with my grandma. I do want to form more friendships, whatever it might be. So I think before we really break down the goals, it's just really figuring out what even are your goals and how do we navigate that. So that's probably what I find to be the most useful, is us having to help them navigate it. Because again, remember, they're not always the driver in the car. So they're always hearing their parents saying, this is your goal, this is your goal, this is your goal. But what really is their underneath goal? What does that look like for them?
Right. And when you do have a teen, and you mentioned quite a few, will say 7 to 8, how many of our teens, to me, a lot, will not seem motivated? And when they're not motivated, especially in relation to social communication, it's often a result of years for the teen and adult of not being successful and feeling defeated.
Mm-hmm.
And often that's a result of too high of expectation over time, and not
Yeah.
having a clear path for their social communication, with knowing what strategies to do, when to do it, have clear, concrete, written out goals. When I talk to most families that have been in past treatment, what tends to be missing is the actionable plan, the actual
Mm-hmm.
step by step, not just working towards it, giving them kind of a goal, but written out concrete step by step goals. That's almost like their own navigation system. Because I
Yeah.
often say, when you get out of the Philadelphia airport and you're coming to Communicamp or you're coming to our center, do you just get in your car and drive aimlessly? No, you go to Apple Maps or Google Maps and you plug in our address and you go 3 miles north and then 2 miles, west, and yada, 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 because you need that navigation, and that's the goal. And I find when we start to work with teens, they become more motivated when, one, we meet them where they're at. And sometimes meeting
Yeah.
them where they're at is really a bridge down for many of them. It's not just being verbal, verbal, verbal. It's like taking that out of the picture. Of course, that's our goal, but we have to meet them where they're at and helping them. And I love what you said about kind of giving them examples of what some goals are. And that's the beauty that I see when they are working with others with selective mutism, like at Communicamp, honestly, they're working in a group and they're hearing what other teens' goals are. And
Yeah.
that often helps them realize, wow, that's hard for them too. I would like to be able to do that. Because let's face it, what teen or adult doesn't want to connect unless they have like a neurodevelopmental difficulty? And that's important to mention here, is that we do have a percentage of teens and adults that have neurodivergence, such as autism spectrum disorder, and they truly don't necessarily want to connect with peers. Not so much the
Right.
anxiety, but it's a puzzle they can't figure out. And we're not going to get too
Right.
much into it, but I do think it's important to differentiate that. So when it comes to setting
Definitely.
goals, I usually say the big goals, the big long-term, big picture goals, and then what are short-term goals that we can start to do to get to those big goals. How are you doing that
Exactly.
in terms of kind of planning and navigating their path to do that?
Yeah. So let's say one of the goals that a teen has is that they want to build more friendships. Because again, that connection, that what 1C is so important. Usually what we'll do is I usually will break down into, okay, well, that's a huge goal that we want to work on, right? But what could that look like? And for many teens, again, the connection isn't always something that they have. And a lot of times that could be them not feeling as comfortable initiating into that type of environment. So let's say, again, the long-term goal, I want to build more connections, but then maybe in treatment, we start really exploring what that looks like. I learned that the child loves chess. I learned that they have a chess club at their school and we're talking about that. So maybe the first goal is, okay, well, let's look at our weekly calendar. Okay, if we want to build connections, let's kind of write down what are all the different social opportunities that we can have that can allow you to build those connections. And again, let's say it starts at chess club. So maybe the first step is, maybe that Monday, we're going to write an email and we're going to send that to the leader of the chess club. And again, they're not used to being the driver in the car. So sometimes that could look like me helping them navigate that in session. And they send that out, right? Maybe Tuesday is the first time that they meet the chess club, or sorry, let's say Wednesday's the time where they meet for the chess club. That means that Tuesday we don't have anything going on. Well, what could be a helpful way for us to prepare for the chess club so that we can feel more comfortable? Because we know going into situations when we maybe don't know anyone, that can feel really scary. And if we want to build connections, we want to think about maybe common questions that people might ask at that chess club so that we can go in feeling more prepared. And again, this could look different depending on where someone is on the social communication bridge, but whether they're verbal, using a transitional strategy, like let's say they have a verbal intermediary because maybe they have one buddy, or maybe their teacher is someone that can help navigate, or even if they're nonverbal, they can still write down, let's say, a list of some common questions. So let's say, that we come up with a bunch of questions, like what's your name? What grade are you in? If it's just a club, maybe the whole high school does it. Have you played chess before?
So you're basically mentioning with the common questions, greetings, but also doing action plans. Who's going to be there? What can they ask? What would be the answer? What could you ask? And you kind of walk them through. So we take each of these scenarios. And what I love about what you're saying is, in order to accomplish these goals, we're giving them a navigation. We're helping them step by step get there. Not, okay, I want to have more friends or connect more. We're having them play chess, something they enjoy with others. And through the activity, they will form connections, which will increase their confidence, which will increase their communication, most likely, especially as we prepare for it.